12th informal work session of the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners. It's a little after 1:30. We'll go ahead and get started. Work session, and we do not have any work, under item A, we do not have any work sessions scheduled today, so we'll move to...
I can comment on that in case there's questions.
Okay.
You know, just like, because I put out an email yesterday that Abishaw from SEDCOR had a
Right.
scheduling conflict today, and that's why we've rescheduled the work session on economic development till the 26th of March. And it's also the same time that Abishaw will be before the board to give an update at that same time.
Okay.
You know, so it works out well.
You know, Ken, one thing I think for me that'd be helpful, because you bring up a good point, is if we have a work session scheduled like Abishaw, and I understand why we
We
couldn't
should
do
put
it,
canceled.
but leave it on it, but put canceled or postponed or whatever.
Right.
So at least we know then that we were supposed to have one.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Ken. So that will end our work session. We'll go into informal session. And this time is reserved for briefings, receipt of reports, consultation among commissioners and staff, reports from other commissioners on recent actions in their areas of responsibility, and other personnel and administrative decisions appropriate. So we'll move to department updates, and we have Cynthia in the audience. So come on forward, Cynthia, and give us a good update report.
I don't know if it'll be good.
Oh, and you brought somebody with you.
Something special here, so I just thought I'd introduce Susan. Susan's the new transit program, program coordinator. I wanted to say project. And she's been here now
4.5 weeks.
4.5 weeks.
Wow,
I
that
keep
long.
coming back. I don't know.
So right now,
Because you like us, and you like Cynthia, that's correct.
I do.
do you have any questions you want to ask her? And otherwise, I'll just say one thing. I'm so glad she's here because we are making our first round of changes on that related to the transit development plan. We're doing all the timing changes. We have to update the schedules. So she is deep in all of the editing and getting that done, getting it to the printer and all that kind of stuff. So those things are very time consuming, and it's great to have someone. She has a strong marketing background, so it's going to be really helpful in that area because there's always a lot of that to do, and so I'm excited about it.
And we're doing the April one?
Oh yes, let me tell you, I will, and so we're planning to implement this first round of changes April 1st. If all goes well, we get everything done, then we will have that first round of changes. And the next round, we're shooting for, we hope to get it done by the Remarkable Rider Day, which is the first Monday in August for the next round of changes.
Just a question, Cynthia, and you guys can probably answer this. Because we're looking at doing the first round of changes with some of the timings and everything on April 1st, that's basically 2 weeks. How is the public, since you're in the marketing person, how is the public going to be ensure that enough time that they know all those changes?
Well, this first round, remember, it's what we've been trying to do for a very long time, so it's more timing. There's nothing really, it's not like you're changing a route and adding a route or doing anything really complicated. It's timing changes, so we're not late anymore like on the 44. A few of the things we did the test for the stop at Winco, so we're incorporating that in. That went well. The store manager was okay with that. So there's some things, they're not major changes, and everything that we're doing was included in the plan. So from a public outreach perspective, we've met the requirements by doing that. Now what we'll do to make sure we get the word out, I think we're actually going to have to probably place some advertising in both the newspapers.
That's what I was thinking about.
And we'll get flyers out on all the buses and to all the people, before it actually.
Yeah, because even if the timing changed by 5 minutes or 7 minutes on a route or something like that, I can see where if people aren't aware that timing changed, that they can get there 5 minutes early, which will now be 10 minutes early if it's a 5-minute change, and wonder, okay, did I miss it this time, or is it going to be late, or so?
Yeah, we kind of agree with you. But if we wait, one of the concerns is we have our on-site audit, the federal and ODOT audit is April 14th and 15th. We wanted to get this round done before that, but if it could be that we run into some problems, and if we do, then we may have to push it back a little bit. But we're shooting.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly for putting it in April as soon as we can. I'm just really want to make sure that everybody is aware, all of our ridership is aware of those changes.
Right. We're training on Sunday, and they will have the new brochures for training. As soon as we have the printed brochures, even before the 1st, they will start and distribute those as early as we can.
Okay, and those will be also pasted out on the be out on the website and
Correct.
everything.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
Would you like me to go through some of the things that are happening
Yeah.
in transit, the transit update, or the things that are coming up on the board, for the board agenda? First, it doesn't matter to me.
I was gonna say both, but.
Both.
But do you care what order?
No.
Should I just start with like some
I'm
quick
good.
updates on transit?
Mhm.
I don't have a document for you or a presentation, but I'll just highlight a few things. In addition to what we just talked about, the bus schedules and the service changes, we have obviously the upcoming, I hate to really call it an audit, but the triennial review that happens every 3 years. And it is scheduled, and I just got my first email that actually gave us the timeline, like when they're planning, what the day will look like, let's just put it that way. And some of you, I think I had sent you information to kind of block out some time for this week, that week, and it's the week of April 15th and 16th. And the first task is, and I've been gathering a lot of this up to this point, but we have a website or a place that we have to upload all these documents to. And so we've been working on getting all of those put together and gathering them and getting them uploaded. But that's a process. It takes some time. It might mean that we need to bring, I don't know if it's necessary to bring all these plans, like the Title VI plan and the DBE plan, all the things that we got done after the last audit, if they need to be re-adopted or renewed in any way. I don't know that we're gonna have time to do that, but I suppose if the auditors come and say, hey, they want us to, we can always put that on the agenda and do it. But from my understanding, when we looked through some of the documents, there might be a few things that we wanna update dates and that sort of thing, but nothing substantive has really changed in those plans. So let's see, I'll probably schedule a meeting and I'll talk with Ken about how to do this to make sure that whoever will be involved from county staff, most likely Christians does have some connection, and also facilities, and there's a few other areas, so we can sit down and have a meeting about that. Make sure people know what to expect. And the buses are being wrapped. You may have seen some of them out there. I think they're just about done with all the new buses. I think there's maybe 2 more, and so probably by the end of the week we should have all the new buses wrapped, and they're starting on the next segment of buses.
I have a question for you, Cynthia. I noticed a couple, and I don't know if they just didn't complete the wraps, but I've seen the green ones. I like the color scheme we're going with, but I've seen a couple that are either don't look wrapped, but they're not white. They look gray in the front.
They have sort of a tan front. Those are the demand response.
Those are the demand response, because you really can't, they almost look like the body color of the bus, so you can't really tell what they're used for, but those are an on-demand bus?
Yes.
Okay.
They
I've
were
started to
originally
see
gonna
them and
be
notice
kind
them.
of a reddish color, but when we put it on, it was too close to the purple, and it just didn't look good. And so we ended up stayed within the same color family and went with the tan. I kind of agree with you. It wouldn't be my first choice, but we were sort of at a...
Well, I was just wondering, because it's not a color I'd seen, and I didn't know if they hadn't finished wrapping the bus, or if
No,
that's the color
is
it was
finished.
intended to be.
It's in the sort of family of colors, but it wasn't the one that I had
Okay.
originally showed you.
That's fine.
It just didn't, the red was too much. It didn't look very good. The contrast wasn't right, so. What else? Those are the big issues, the upcoming audit, the changing of the service. So I did have I got bids in for pricing for bus stop markings. We've talked about this over the years, and it's been kind of a ongoing topic, but it was, getting bus stop signs, getting bus stops marked is a high priority. It was moved up in our list of projects by the committee, Yamhill County Transit Committee. So I went ahead and moved forward and got to get pricing. It looks like I've only gotten 1 bid, and but what the first round is to just go out and mark them with like pavement marking, either on the concrete or on the asphalt. And then from there, we can identify which places really need to have an actual sign, because doing the signage will take a lot longer. There's a lot more process. So So I've got the bid, but I just got it yesterday, so that will be probably coming to you shortly, and we'll be able to have some more time to talk about it.
You know, I just might suggest on the, when we get to the actual signage, that if you haven't talked to the planning department and the staff there, you're looking at, so you've probably heard of Sea Reach before. It's a company out of Sheridan that does work all over the world. And if we can, I don't know what they have for their design, but if we could come up with something similar, incorporate some of our design of our signs into some of their designs so they all look the same, we may be able to get a pretty good deal on them, so.
Now, you mean their signs being?
They're all their information, directional signs are
Oh,
putting in the
they're
downtown
the-
area and
the
everything.
wayfinding signs.
The wayfinding signs.
Yeah.
And we also work with them, our Public Works,
Yeah.
for the blue signs.
For the blue signs, yeah.
Yeah, because that'd really be nice.
I have the cameras, I think I've told you this before, but we did a bid for a new camera system, and I just haven't quite had time to get that to you, but that'll be coming to you shortly as well. And then I think those are the big issues. There's been a lot going on, but we're moving in a positive direction. So if you have
How's the new,
questions-
coming along, how's the new automated dispatch and system?
They've been doing video training, online training, and then we're scheduling the on-site training for April 8th, I think, the week of April 8th. But we have to get all of the, we have some things we have to do before they come and actually do that. So they're moving along, but it's a process.
So what kind, are we talking maybe a July to August, September timeframe of when the app may be available for?
Well, there's
people
two
that-
parts. The one that the training is happening on
Right.
the 8th, that is for the new on scheduling software.
Right.
So that's not related to the app. The app, as soon Christian has the contract, as soon as we get the signed agreement, then that'll move fairly quickly. But you're right, it's probably summer. We have
Okay.
to finish it before June 30 because it's grant funded, and the grant has to be finished by then. So by this summer, I think, what we're
Okay.
hoping is to
That's
be sort of a
satisfactory.
kickoff around in conjunction with Remarkable Writer Day. So then we can kind of talk about all these things, the new technology, the new look, and get all that sort of
Okay,
kicked
thank
off
you.
at the same time.
Any other questions for
Well,
Cynthia?
I think-
Casey, you have any? Or Ken, you have comments?
Because just keeping in mind, there's some agenda items that are on here, but the way things flow with transit, we're going to be discussing them at 9:30 on Thursday as
Yep.
part of YCTA, and then potential second discussion at the board, because that goes through both. So maybe saving the discussion here, but I wanted to add, maybe you want to go in and talk about the RFP and the status of that. I think
Yes.
that's
the main one.
and of course, that's driving one of the agenda items that's coming before you on Thursday with regards to the extension, the contract extension with First Transit. And so I think it's, really what's driving that is the RFP process, and I think that would be important to kind of give an update or overview of what that timeline's gonna look like and where we're at.
So all of you get a copy of the timeline, the draft timeline document for the request for proposal. this
Yeah.
month?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe it was in the packet.
Yeah.
It looks familiar.
So really, the decision you have to make is if you want to extend the current First Transit contract, and for how long. We have had some discussions with them. They're open to the 6-month extension with 3 1-month, additional months if we need them. I think we can probably get it done faster than that. The timeline that I gave you that has a February 1 start date, it's reasonable. I think it gives enough time for all the various people that need to review it. It gives enough time for Christian to review. Once we give him the document drafts, it gives you time to look at it. It also gives time for the vendors. They'll have at least, let's see, we have the notice going out. They have from May 2nd, and then their bids are due July 19th.
Yeah, that
So
should
that
be
gives them
adequate.
a decent amount of time to put a
Yeah.
proposal in. And then it gives we did take this draft through the Yamhill County Transit Advisory Committee to make sure that the time frame when the review committee, which is a subgroup of that committee, would look at the proposals, rank the proposals, and interview finalists. And so that happens in August 1 to 16, and then August 20 to 27. And, I mean, this could be moved up a little faster, so if we do move it faster, I think our existing contract gives us the flexibility that if we had to, you know, if we wanted to, if we got it done quicker, we wouldn't have to wait that long. But we do have Christmas in there, we've got Thanksgiving, you know, and we had looked at one version where it starts on January 1st, but that's, you know, January 1st isn't the great date.
That's what I say. I'd rather go to like the 6th. That's I was interested in that, and give them the more time and do it right than try to quick sell. Because that's a big if we should decide to change vendors, whoever gets it, that's a huge process. So
Yeah, and this gives them, if a new vendor is selected, then it gives them from the transition period, you approve it on September 12th, and then they have, say, a notice to proceed in October, and then they'd have till February 1st. So
Yeah.
it gives someone,
Yeah.
an entity enough time to do what they need to do. We had looked, you know, at trying to do it before July 1, but it's just so tight. And you know, I had hoped that we could do all that with the amount of work that was for the STIF application and all of the things that have been going on, finishing the transit development plan, it just was too much. So I am sorry that we couldn't get that done by July 1.
well, I'd say I'd rather wait and do it
It's
right.
just been a lot going on in the transit world.
Yeah, I know when you presented maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, it's like there's a lot going on in that time frame. So I understand.
Well, I'm glad that they're open to, and I think, did you get a copy of their letter? So the new, if you do the extension, the proposed hourly rate that they gave us is about a 5.5% increase, so it's right around $50 an hour, which is
Which
good.
makes
It's a good
sense.
rate. Actually, it's a better rate than a lot of our colleagues who have, you know, contract out their service. Also, it does include, I took all of the potential service changes that we hope to make during this 9-month period and added those hours in, and so gave them a list of what, you know, additional hours that they may need to expect. I think they were a little worried, First Transit's possibly a little worried that making service changes during this transition, you know, sometimes when you make changes that you can create, you know, you can have problems because you're making changes. So they don't want to look bad, and so I think they were a little bit worried about that. But we had a good discussion and got through the issues, and I think I'm pleased with what they gave us. I think it's a good option, and they're willing to work with us, you know, and do whatever we need to do.
So right now, what's the target for the release date of the RFP?
The release date of the RFP is, we have here that the commissioners would complete their review by like mid-April, and then approve it to be sent out to vendors by May 2nd. That's and
That's good.
advertisements that week and so on. So,
Mhm. And can you remind me when YCTAC is meeting?
They're meeting April 4th and
Okay.
April 25th.
Okay.
So
That's
we
right,
have
we have
two,
two
because
that
I'm,
month.
Yeah.
I'm on vacation
In
next
March.
week, so
Okay.
we're gonna be early April and then April 25th.
Okay.
Then do we need to talk about the STF, or do we want to talk about that on Thursday?
That's on the,
Thursday agenda, that's
That's on the
definitely.
I will say two things about that, and we could say it again on Thursday, but I did get some good news just a couple days ago that they have, you know, there's a spreadsheet that shows what the Yamhill County Transit Advisory Committee recommended for allocations. And I asked them to vote on both, if we had this $10 million cut, which affected us by a 40% cut in our normal funding. So the committee voted both ways. Full funding, here's how their recommendation is, and then if there was a 40% cut, what their recommendation is. I still think that the board should, and this is a Board of Commissioners action, not a Yamhill County Transit Board
Right.
action. So I would recommend you vote both ways, even though there's good news, because it isn't final yet if that 10 million will stay. But the latest proposal is that they put it back into the budget. There's talk about where they're gonna get it from, but, you know.
to clarify, the 10 million cut is a
Yeah.
statewide.
It's statewide.
It's statewide.
Yeah.
Statewide,
Yes, yes,
it's not
sorry,
a $10
statewide.
million cut to
It
Not
was
to
our
us.
in
program.
the
The
in the
effect
agenda
to
packet.
us-
It was very clear to
the
me.
effect to us is a 40% cut. We typically
Yeah.
just use round numbers, get around 500,000 for 2 years, so
Mhm.
about 250,000.
Right.
So a 40% cut is, almost $100,000 a year. So
Yeah.
we had quite a discussion at the committee meeting, and they did a great job. The committee kind of, looked at, well, we could do this, we could do that. But the bottom line is, even if they took a 40% cut off all of the smaller nonprofit providers, it didn't help us, it didn't help Yamhill County Transit much. So they had decided to just recommend to fully fund the smaller entities, and then basically the cut would come to YCTA.
Mhm.
We use those funds for match, that's what we use them for. So it really is we take almost everything we don't give to the sub-providers, we use as match for our federal 5311 funds, which is our main operating source. So a dollar loss is a $2 loss, and maybe even a little bit more than that to us. So I did talk to a lot of colleagues and try to bring the issue up with Oregon Transit Association and various people who are working on this. And the interesting thing I learned is there's not as many smaller entities like ours affected as much as we are. Ride Connection is pretty affected. We were affected, and just a couple others where, I'm not that everybody isn't affected, but not to the level that we are. So we were able to get that word out, and then whoever the folks are that, made their case, they obviously did a good job and got it reinstated. At least it isn't finalized, so everybody said, cross your fingers and hope that it happens. So if you vote for both, then we'll be covered and we'll be able to meet the deadlines. I have to get the proposal into the state for the 5310 and STF funds by this Friday, actually. So is that right? Oh, yeah, it is, yeah.
It is,
Today's
believe it or
already the
not,
12th,
it is, yeah.
Yes, it is. So you'll literally be voting on it, and I'll be submitting the application on Friday, so it's tight.
Okay. Any other questions for?
Now, the information in the agenda packet was
Very good,
helpful.
very
Yeah,
good
yeah.
information.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions for Cynthia?
I
No?
don't, thank you.
Yeah.
Ken,
Thank
anything
you.
you want to follow on?
Thank
Nope.
you.
Thank you very much,
All right.
Cynthia.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you.
Yeah.
And
Thank you,
welcome.
Susan. Thank you.
Okay, that'll take us past our department updates and the Thursday formal session agenda review. And this is where we look to whether we want to keep or move things to consent or add anything to the consent agenda. So attached was the actual draft agenda for Thursday. We have our old business. Then we have there's no old business, other business. And these are items we need to either consider to add on to the consent or leave them as non-consent agenda items. There's a consideration of approval of contract between Synergy Health Consulting and Yamhill County Health and Human Services for medication-assisted treatment, MAT consulting services. How do we feel? Well, we want to add that to consent, or do we want to leave it off for discussion?
Consent.
I'm happy to move it to consent.
Okay, so we can move item D1 to consent. Okay, item D2 is considers approval of a contract for service between Yamhill County and OBEC Consulting Engineers for Yamhill's West Side Trail pedestrian bridge in the amount of $534,695. I would like to leave that off the consent agenda for item
Please.
30, so that will stay off as a other business item. Item number 3, consideration approval of cancellation of uncollectible personal property taxes per ORS 311-790 as recommended by the tax collector.
I think
So
that
is
should be
there
on.
Consent.
Consent.
Yeah,
Consent,
please move
okay.
to consent.
So D3 will be moved to the consent agenda. Item number 4, consideration of approval of a yield sign for northbound traffic on Muddy Valley Road. I drove that the other day. I think that's a yield is a very, very, it's like stop if there's other cars coming is what it should be, but
Yeah, but I appreciate Billy Anderson's let's put something here as a start.
yeah, so let's, I'm for putting that on the consent agenda.
I am as well.
Okay, so D4 will go to the consent agenda. D5, consideration of appointments of John Mercer and Jeff Brown to RIAC, the Road Improvement Advisory Committee, each for a 3-year term to expire March 14th, 2022. I think those are the recommendations. I'm fine with putting
Those are
that on the
recommendations
consent
of
agenda.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So D5 will go to the consent agenda. D6, consideration of approval of contract between Yamhill County Transit and First Transit effective July 1 through 2/19 through December 1, 2019, with the option to include 3 one-month extensions as needed. Do we want to actually consider that as a consent agenda or lead off for more discussion?
Consent?
I'm fine with that as consent. I think you did
Yeah.
a good job of working
I think it's a good idea.
working that out. I don't have it, Ken.
And with the YCTA in the morning, if any of these items, if
Right.
it comes up at
We can
new
pull it-
information
we
or
can pull it
during that
back off.
discussion, you can pull that off at
Yeah.
that meeting.
Okay, so let's
Yeah, thank
move
you.
item D6 to the consent agenda. Item D7, consideration of approval of a purchase order between Yamhill County Transit and Shketsky Northwest for the purchase of 4 Champion low-floor buses and 2 Dodge American minivans in the amount of $657,770. I recommend that we move that to the consent agenda. So let it show that D7 will be moved to the consent agenda. Our last one is D8, consideration approval of a 2019-21 allocation for the 5310 SDF funding and recommended by YTAC. So that's the one we'll be voting on twice, isn't it?
Both
On the
at
recommendation.
YCCA and
On their recommendations, so that, I'm fine with doing that.
yeah, because we'll have the opportunity to
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yep.
As the board.
Mhm.
So move that to the consent agenda, item number D8. Okay, we have one public hearing, and that's a math gathering application for the 2019 Memorial Week.
I think we have 2, Mr.
Two
Chair.
Oh,
hearings.
2, excuse me.
Yes.
Memorial Boat Races on May 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, and that's the Newburgh Boat Club and Columbia Outboard Racing Association. So we'll have that as a public hearing. Christian or anybody, you have any comments on that public hearing?
We will on Thursday.
On Thursday.
Okay, got it. That's, I just wanted to make sure. Item number 2, mass gathering permit application for the 2019 Wildwood Music Festival event on July 19th, 20th, and 21st. And that applicant is Kimberly Hamlin, so we'll have a public hearing on that. And then announcements for information on county advisory committees vacancies, it says that for. So we will go through our normal announcements on Thursday, so. That will cover our Thursday agenda, then draft agenda, and we can finalize our Thursday agenda. Then, so we don't have any executive session scheduled for today, so that'll take us to commissioner updates, announcements, and discussion. So Mary, let's start with you this time.
Okay. Yesterday was AOC, and this is a busy time. This is the commissioners who gather from all over the state to come and discuss pending legislation. There were a couple of things that were quite concerning to me, and I have to say quite disappointing. And I'm going to start with House Bill 3199. This is a bill that Representative Noble has sponsored. We'd had discussions here at the county that we have foreclosed properties that the commissioners are tasked with declaring surplus and then auctioning off. So the governance committee said that they did not want to support this. And I was thinking that we would not have a problem at AOC with other commissioners, since they're tasked with, being representatives of their constituents, and that it was the legislature that was going to be the one that gave us some pushback. But this was their reason in the governance committee for not thinking it's okay to give people back their money minus taxes and fees. Quote, "People should pay their taxes. We would have to change the way we do everything if we pass this bill. The foreclosure process takes years. People should have figured it out. These properties usually don't sell for much anyway." There you go. Now, I think that when we have commissioners who have looked at this without acknowledging that number one consideration here is that this is a constitutional issue. This is an issue which flies in the face of the Fifth Amendment. Government cannot take what is not theirs. This is what government clearly does. There are 45 other states that have figured out a way to do this. But the state of Oregon, and apparently, and we don't know, maybe the legislature will disappoint us, but Representative Noble weighed in on this morning, and I told him what had happened yesterday at AOC. He said, this is a constitutional issue. This has nothing to do with anything else. It is a constitutional issue. And Commissioner Olson, I was very disappointed that you abstained and didn't support this bill when in the past you've called it a good idea and it's only fair.
That's great, and I understand your disappointment, but being part of the governance committee, I heard a lot of, other than what you said, of a lot of other arguments that I thought I hadn't taken into consideration. Now, if we want to go on record as a commission, supporting it as an individual commission, that's our right to do that. But it was evident that during that, with a lot of the other comments made during the governance committee, that was not going to pass in any way, shape, or form. And things that weren't on your list that we're talking about is general comments like, okay, we refund this back to the property owner. They're going to get the benefit, economic benefits. Now, does that mean that they can go out and use that for another down payment 3 or 4 years from now, be stuck in that same situation? There was a thing about, well, do we really trust the people if they couldn't pay their taxes for 6 years? Because you only have to pay 1 year. I mean, they had 6 years and they only have to pay 1 year that back, and then that would keep the foreclosure process going. If there was an incentive for somebody in a 6-year period to pay 1 year of property taxes, so it didn't go into foreclosure, what incentive, really what incentive is there for the individuals, knowing that if after that 6 years it goes into foreclosure and they're going to be given credit of their equity, what incentive is there for those people to pay their back taxes? There really isn't any incentive for those people to pay their back taxes. So that was discussed quite a bit. And the other one was what most counties said is the kind of property that they look at, that they bring back in, and they foreclose on, don't have any market value. And by the time, and the little market value they do have, by the time they go through any cleanup and they go through any remediation and everything, that the county's going to be in the hole anyway, and there's not going to be any money to give back. So I think there were some other things, other than what you said, Mary. There were some other things that were brought up that made logical sense. It was evident that there were a couple members on the committee that were kind of feeling the way I was, but there were definitely that there was no way that this was going to get full backing of the legislative committee. So.
Well, I think it's important to realize if we don't trust people with what is essentially theirs, if we can make that judgment call, there's not much equity in it anyway if the house is all trashed. I don't think that's our judgment to make. I think at the end of the day, if someone walked away with $1,000, do we trust them that they're not, what are you going to do with that $1,000? I mean, really the issue is, do we have the right to take this money above and beyond what is owed in taxes? And I think, again, it's government overreach, and if the other 45 states in this country can do it, we can do it as well. And I'm disappointed about that. The other thing is...
before you...
Yes.
I wanted to weigh in that I was thinking about what you just said when Chair Olson was talking about that, about how ultimately the system is about trust that we have here, and that we do need to trust that people change and that situations change, and that we are only taking what is owed to us during it. So I'm glad that you mentioned it.
I also, Casey,
I know I'm not challenging you.
No, but I know you're not, but I'll also say this. If you're talking about trust, we trust people when they purchase a piece of property to pay their property taxes, to go to all the organizations, all the districts that get that money. And for 6 years, they haven't got that.
Right.
They haven't got that money. So we're going to give them, part of that goes back and pays back that 6 years. But what could they have done with that money if they were getting that property tax money every year? So we're trusting the individual to pay their taxes.
Yeah.
And if they should
make a
decide
good
not
point.
to pay it, I mean, it's a good argument both ways. I see it both.
And it's
both
not
ways
just
myself.
about us.
Yeah.
I think that's a good reminder. That it's not just us as the county.
It's about all other taxing
Yeah.
districts also, so,
Right.
to me.
I'm sorry to interrupt you,
But
but I
anyway,
just wanted
Mary, but you
to
make a good
No.
put my
you
own
make a good
thoughts in
point,
there.
Mary.
Well, to me, it's, once again, we take a look at constitutional issues and say that's a quaint old document, but really doesn't apply to us because we don't want it to, and especially when you're asking government to give revenue back. I knew that was going to be a tough lift. The other thing that I was disappointed in, there are two bills that are causing great commotion down in Salem, and those are the bills that have to do with forced inoculation, which is the mandatory vaccine bills, and the other one is the informed consent, which says that parents or anyone should be given a list of the ingredients in a vaccine. And if anybody goes to the CDC website and all you have to do is pull up the vaccine ingredients, you'll see ingredients like monosodium glutamate, mercury, aluminum, and things that we wouldn't typically put in our bodies, yet we're giving that in 20 doses to a child before he's 2 years old. So I think that we should, as stewards of the public trust, be able to say, here's a list of what's in the vaccines. But the CLO, Coalition of Local Health Officers, is against giving that information to people, and they are also supportive of requiring mandatory vaccinations. So I think that in this situation, it's very difficult to see that the state of Oregon is going to be having that heavy-handed approach to medical freedom. So I was concerned and disappointed that Health and Human Services and Legislative Committee voted against those particular options for people.
Yeah, I can weigh in on that one. I think that separating into two different issues, what Mary said. I believe that people should know everything that goes into those vaccinations, and that should be published, and families should be made aware of that. That I totally agree with. But I've hit this other issue before. It was 10 years ago when City of McMinnville had to decide if through our city water night we were going to continue to fluoridate our water or not. I mean, this is the same exact issue because we had a large contingent who says, no, that's parental responsibility to fluoridate water. You shouldn't, the city should not demand or put fluoridating against the will of the people. Well, that's one of those issues that, to me, is sometimes you're damned if you don't, if you're damned if you do, because tests have proven that without fluoridation, I mean, all over the instance of cavities and teeth decay and everything, tooth decay, are greater in those kids, adolescent kids that have not received fluoride. So if we could trust everybody to make sure their kids through whatever means they use got the fluoride to protect their teeth, but I think this is that same thing. So Mary, I one of those that it's terrible that there are decisions, and most of them are like those kind of social, and I'll call this a social decision because it's both sides. I agree that they should be notified of everything that they should get, but yet then what about all the kids that get the vaccination? Is it fair to all those kids to take that if they get the vaccination to go to school with somebody that may have not been vaccinated? I don't know, and so I really look at that. Is that an issue that the county should really be in? Is that an issue the county should be responsible for, or is that a state issue? I look back at the old delegation of responsibilities of state, county, and then state and county put together. Is that issue whether we provide, where we do or do vaccinations? I understand, Mary, I understand totally where you're coming from, but is that an issue that we should be addressing at the county level?
Well, we require them through the public health department, or we make them available. And I know at the Board of Health meeting one time, I had a parent bring in a vaccine-injured baby. And until you've seen that happen with a mandated vaccine, it is not something you can remedy. The child is affected. So I do think it's a medical, it's a personal choice and medical freedom. And when we start to say as overlords, are we going to trust people to give their kids fluoride? They're finding now, Commissioner, that not only is fluoride they're seeing it's detrimental to people's health overall, but that the supposed benefit is really not what it was cracked up to be. So I think when we look back at some of the mistakes that medical science has made, and then we're telling people we're going to mandate this stuff, I think it's of concern.
I agree it's of concern. don't know if I agree it's at I mean, to bring that forward to everybody, I think that's our responsibility. But to actually adjudicate or came to a decision on whether it's gonna be done or not,
Yeah.
I even though we do have public health and HHS, I'm not sure that that is our responsibility.
I see what you mean.
That's the
I'm-
states, and we were
That's the
talking
state,
about
yeah.
that
Yeah.
yesterday.
And I appreciate that. I think that I've been thinking about this a lot, especially since we had a 6-hour hearing that seemed to balance kind of like public good and then personal rights and freedoms and responsibilities. So I was thinking about it just today with respect to this particular vaccine mandate. And I think it's something that the three of us are going to, we constantly balance those two, the good of a group versus protecting individual rights and freedoms. And so I'm glad that we are, but it's clear that everybody here is aware of it.
Yeah.
But I keep it in mind all the time.
Well, when I was mayor, in the 8 years I was mayor, I had to vote 3 times to break a tie, because the mayor only,
Mhm.
in our home
Right.
rule government, only votes to break a tie in the council. I had to vote 3 times to break a tie. And all 3 of those times were on issues that I knew I was gonna have to vote to break a tie. They
Mhm.
were on the fluoridation issue. They were on whether social gaming should be allowed downtown,
Mhm.
and whether the people approved it, whether we should allow the retail sale of marijuana in the
Mhm.
city of McMinnville, even though the people of McMinnville approved it. And those are the 3 issues. And
How did
so-
you vote?
What?
I
Even
know
though
how
I'd
you
never
voted.
used marijuana, didn't like it, I voted for it because that's what the people of McMinnville wanted.
Mhm.
And the other
On the
fluoride?
social gaming, I voted no. And that was more of an economic development, because studying what impact social gaming has on economic development, I voted no. And on the
Mhm.
fluoride, I voted to continue fluoridating
Mhm.
our water. So, but I didn't know almost till I got there which way I was gonna vote, because they were tough
Mhm.
tough votes. But
Yeah.
these are the kind of issues that I'm glad the 3 of us can kind of talk about.
Yeah. Me too.
Because there are so many different ways to go, and, you
Mhm.
know, it's important that we all work together and understand where everybody else is coming from,
Mhm.
so we can come to a resolution, even if the resolution is to agree not to disagree, or to agree to disagree.
Mhm.
That's fine, but I think instead of having these kind of things, like you said, Casey, talking about these kind of things, I think is very helpful, very helpful.
I think
to
it
the
is too.
commission.
I think about how with a lot of this, there's data behind certain things, but the data can only get you so far before you still need to make a decision on either the social good or the protecting individual freedoms.
And I think at the end of the day, for me, it always will be individual liberties.
Mhm.
And how does this square up against not only the Constitution of the United States, but the Constitution of the State of
The State of
Oregon,
Oregon.
which we
Mhm.
took oaths to uphold?
Mhm.
And that's the First Amendment all the way down.
Yeah.
So that's preeminent as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
Well, and I really appreciate that. I mean, you know, and I can't really argue with that. I can't argue with that either. But I don't expect everybody feels that way, but I can't argue with your point at all. So, okay, any other thing, or Mary,
Yeah.
anything
Oh, yeah,
else
do
you
you
want to talk about?
You
Just
do,
one-
because I interrupted you.
No, I just want to say
Okay.
real quick, this is Social Worker Appreciation Month. We know that our social workers are definitely in the trenches. Also want to, let's see, our meetings continue with our consultants on the strategic plan for child welfare. We're continuing to do those around the county. We had our first one in Willamina,
Mhm.
and we had a really good turnout. We've got our next one next week in Newburgh, and we're just asking people to come and tell their stories. We also have a DHS bill. I'll have a number tomorrow and be able to talk about the DHS bill, and we'll see how that flies down in Salem to give local control, a little more local management. So fingers crossed on that one. And also, I'll be in Salem with Representative Salinas on a DHS bill, which is something that our HHS committee did pass yesterday. So that's my update.
Nice.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mary. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah.
Casey?
I took a look yesterday at a bunch of the gated roads as they go out of county land and into private and public timberland, and so that was really, really interesting. And it was beautiful because it was sunny all day. So that's why I was not with you.
So
is that
how many did you visit?
let's see. We saw, I want to say 6 different gate locations.
Were they gated local access roads, public roads that went into public property? and
They're at
private?
least public roads before they go past the gate.
Okay.
So that's something that we need to figure out. Is that, but that was really really fascinating to see some communities and little pocket neighborhoods that I don't get into as much because we live on the island.
That's right.
Yeah, but I was realizing that the High Heaven Gate is very similar to our situation on the island, and that there's a small amount of public land and a large amount of private land in between two gates, and that's exactly how our situation is actually on the island. And for us, we the agreement with the county a long time ago was that we would open somebody would open the gate every day, essentially at dawn, and close it at dusk. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, and it's been very effective for us. So
Not one solution fits all. You're
it
right.
might be
That's right.
tricky with hunters wanting to go in the middle of earlier, but I thought, wow, that's interesting to see. And it works on the island. We know that. So especially when the gate is left open. So and then later this weekend coming up, I have a climate change listening session that I'm hosting, asking lots of different folks from across the political spectrum their thoughts on what they want to see happen in the county and where our values line up. And then we'll have a woman from the coordinator of the Northwest Climate Hub, which is part of the U.S. Forest Service, speaking about their work helping farmers and foresters adapt to weather extremes and climate extremes. So that should be very nice. And then my HHS orientation is ongoing, so I'll have my next session this Friday. And that's been very helpful to have a peek into the knowledge that you have as well.
Not me, what Silas has.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
that,
it's like
but
Silas taught
it's
me
good to
everything I
the
know. He
things
just
that you
hasn't taught
see.
me everything he knows.
Yeah, no
know.
kidding.
Yeah,
Is that it, Casey?
I think so.
A couple things. I'll just go back to AOC Day yesterday. I think these are the kind of times that I appreciate AOC as an organization. If you look at the number of bills that impact the county, that ones Mary talked about, but just the total number of bills that affect preemption at the county level, that affect land use planning at the county level, everything there is, that the amount of bills that we go over, I don't think any county could ever review all those bills by themselves. It would just be totally impossible. And to learn what some of your neighboring counties, and even counties on the other side of the state, are thinking on different things, really puts a different perspective on it, that it isn't a one size fits all. So, that was very good. Another thing that we talked about at the board meeting yesterday, at AOC board meeting, is that the road fund is about 70% paid back now. We only have a couple counties we've only have one county, and I don't know which one it is, one county that said they're just not going to pay. Every other county has indicated they're going to pay. Now what they're doing with some of the counties, they're working out the details of whether they were going to be over 3 years or it's going to be over 5 years. But out of the 36 counties, 25 of the 36 counties have already paid the full amount. So it's getting pretty good. About 2/3 has been paid back. The health of AOC now, with a lot of the cuts we made and hold even, the health of AOC is good. Our audit came back very good, and then we had to have a forensic audit done to make sure that the condition that got us there was no illegal activity, embezzlement, and the auditors that did that found no sign of that. It was just sloppy record keeping, sloppy accounting practices, not having policies on when you turn in something on cash, what the expense was for, and it was a qualified expense, and not having the directors and people at the higher level, letting them approve their own expense reports and not having somebody go through it. So based on all that, the board has appointed a new audit finance committee that will be both doing quarterly audits and quarterly financial reviews and semi-annual audits, and that'll be made up of 5 commissioners from around the state, and I've been appointed to that by the president, and so it's to get more of a control, to make sure the organization is doing what's best for its clients and not what's best for the organization. So I think we've definitely turned a circle. Moss Adams has done a great job of going through our last 5 years. They're up to 17, 18 now, and then they've audited everything back, and we've gone through 3 different accounting systems. So trying to tie one into the other and figure out what did what. We used an accounting system that was such an overkill for an organization like this. So going back to a QuickBooks governmental accounting system is going to just save us tremendous amount of money and give us more information. So I think AOC's off. We've turned a corner and we're off to a good start. Unfortunately, things happen like that with all sorts of organizations. It never should happen. But that's good. O&C counties, I got an email last night. Unfortunately, our director, Rocky McVeigh of O&C counties, had decided to do the same thing I did about 2 years ago, decided to have a little run-in with his ladder.
He's in pretty bad shape.
He's got 2 broken knees, a broken leg,
Ribs.
cracked ribs. And so he's having his first surgery today, but he'll be totally off his feet for at least 6 months. And so he must have came down straight on his feet. So it was not good. So it's like I emailed Bruce and Rocky, and he says, I really feel sorry for you, but I do know the pain that you're going through. So
And that brings up the concern, this who's going to take over, because Rocky's not going to be there forever, and who has the institutional knowledge. We talked about that at Federal Lands.
Yeah.
And there really is no go-to person to do this other stuff. Jay Sullivan, but he can't do it.
he can't. And so I think what we're going to hopefully try to relay, Rocky says he'll be able to provide guidance and do stuff like that. But I think Commissioner Freeman is going to basically, because since he's been so delved in last 5 years, I think he's going to kind of lead the charge for the O&C counties, because Commissioner Freeman knows everything there is to know about the O&C towns. And the other thing on O&C, I thought it would be interesting for either the commission sometime. O&C is trying to get around to all the counties and actually doing about an hour presentation like at a work group about O&C properties, how they came about, why they exist, why we're not, what it has to do with forest management, and to increase everybody's perspective of what O&C counties, because a lot of people haven't heard of O&C counties, because there's only 16 of us of the 36 counties, only 15, are O&C 15 are O&C counties. We're a very small, the second smallest O&C county. The first smallest O&C county is Tillamook County. And Polk County is not an O&C county. Benton County is not an O&C county. Marion County is not an O&C county. One of the largest ones is Clackamas County, but all the southern counties, Douglas, Curry, and everything, they're big O&C counties.
Yeah.
So I'll look at maybe towards the fall or something like that, because the historian from O&C does a great present. It's kind of fun to learn, understand, and he goes through the whole history of things. So he's real good. So, and then other than that, I don't have anything else.
Just one more thing I forgot to mention. I know we've talked particular cases in this county where people have gone on property, like we had out on Hendricks Road, and what do you do about that? How do you deal with that? How do you get people off who are causing a problem? So there is a bill, and once again, Representative Noble to the rescue. We sat down and talked with Todd Sadlow early on, and came up with a bill, 3129, which allows landlords to terminate residential tenancy within 30 days of written notice. And that's if a government agency says this is unlawful occupancy because of a public health or some other issue. So once you get that, you don't have to go through the process, which now can take months, and as we've seen,
The tenant
years.
landlord type process.
So this might happen, and that's encouraging. So that's
One other bill that we might be interested in is, I'm sure everybody's wrote about for the affordable housing, the rent control bill. We're starting around the state now, starting to see some good but some negative impacts of the rent control bill. Because what's happening is because the way that is written, a lot of the owners of apartment complexes, manufactured home parks and everything are going in and raising their rent $50, $60, $75 a month, because they know when it takes effect, they can only go up the cost of living plus a certain percentage.
7% plus
7%.
cost
Plus
of
the
living.
cost of living.
Yeah.
And so they're all coming in now, and everybody knew that this was going to, they even declared an emergency on it, but everybody knew this was going to happen. And, I think it's a good thing, but I think the way it was implemented is going to actually cause for immediately or within the next year, we're gonna see a lot more people getting out of their home, their rental apartments, their rental manufactured homes, their manufactured homes that are owned in parks. And what a lot of park manufacturers are doing, or park owners, especially most ones from California that have property up here, they're wanting to sign their tenants to say, okay, we won't raise your rent, but we want you to sign a 1 year or 2 year lease on your space. Well, once they do that, a lot of the tenant landlord laws go away.
I see.
So they don't have the protection of the tenant landlord laws. So where it takes, up to 6 months to evict a person, that's gone because it's a lease now.
Yeah, well, I think the pushback is just beginning. I spoke to a developer in Newburgh who's selling his apartments, turning them into commercial space. So I think what was started out as, oh, this is a great idea. We've got the only statewide rent control in the country. What happens in rent control, having come from Brooklyn, I can tell you, is they turn apartments into co-ops or condos.
Yeah.
So then you take people who can't afford to buy them, and now there's no inventory of apartments. And then you develop slumlords, because who's going to clean up an apartment and put in new carpet and paint it when you're not allowed to raise the rent to pay for that? So I think this is really, really going to be bad for people who
I do
need to
too.
rent
I think the rent
apartments.
control is actually a bad bill.
Bad idea.
Matter of fact, if you talk to the developers who's developing, taking out the 7 manufactured homes or 6 on First and Irvine down there, and he's putting in that new
Oh, yeah,
apartment
yeah.
complex. He says, I have to do that to recoup my investment, because he says, I have these single wide manufactured and 2 double wide sitting there. He says, I can no longer make money off of them. So what he's gonna do, there's 7 families that are basically gonna be moved out, and he's putting in an
16.
apartment complex, a 3-story apartment complex. Who knows what those are gonna rent for?
Sure.
I don't know, so I think the rent control is a bad idea. But
Yeah.
I remembered one thing too, is that this weekend I visited family in Prineville, and in Prineville, the city has, because they have Google and Apple with data centers there, they suddenly have a higher long-term need for water and a higher long-term need for dealing with their sewage treatment. And so they are doing some very innovative things to map their aquifer, actually. They discovered that under the basalt cliffs, that the Crooked River at some point was under the basalt cliffs, and it's still essentially flowing down there, but at a slower rate than the river itself. So they took a lot of the basic information we have on wells in our area and built a map through PSU of their aquifer, where they're looking to, they knew they needed water for 100 years out. And then they built a water treatment facility. Their sewage treatment facility is essentially after the pre-treatment, they have a wetland, an engineered wetland along the Crooked River that is a park now. So it was really great to see
that's a beautiful
very
park.
biological methods to deal with very technical problems.
Well, and
Interesting.
Yeah.
Prineville, I guess, is looking at, and talking to one of their commissioners, Shutes County commissioners, is it's looking at potentially IBM putting a business resiliency center there, which is a big disaster recovery center.
Right.
Because they're Highway 97 in the Prineville, Madras, Redmond area.
Redmond area, yeah.
It's prime for that kind of development. But then they have the electricity coming off the Columbia River.
Right.
The air farms, the water, and the water is a big, when you're talking about cooling these massive
Yeah.
data centers,
Right.
water is a huge issue.
So apparently by the time it gets to their last pond in their system, and there's lots and lots of wildlife there as a result, and 5 miles of trails, then they pump it up the hill to Apple for their cooling. So then they have yet another source, and then they can drop it back down and run it through again so it cools down before it goes back up.
Repotable water.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, we have anything else?
I have nothing. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
commissioners.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.